My parents were gone before I could even really remember them, so I grew up in my uncle's house. Then one day, out of the blue, Uncle Ray told me it was time to head to the city and earn my keep. I didn't know why the sudden push, but as I was leaving, I saw this look in my Aunt Carol's eyes. It looked like regret, and that's how I ended up as a massage therapist at a fancy spa in Chicago. My manager, an old-timer named Sal, taught me the ropes. He watched me work on a client one afternoon, sighed, and shook his head. Some poor girl's going to be in a world of hurt with you one day, kid. I didn't get it. When I asked him what he meant, he just grinned and clammed up. One day, I was working on this big-shot executive. As I dug into the knots in his shoulders, he just lay there, thinking, a strange glint in his eye. After a long silence, he asked his question, feeling me out. Hey, kid, do you make house calls? My wife could use a massage. She's got some serious knots. My jaw nearly hit the floor. I'd only ever worked on men. I'd never given a woman a massage in my life. The man chuckled. I'll make it worth your while. You got a real talent. My wife has chronic bursitis in her shoulder. Give it a shot. If you can help her, I'll give you $10,000. My mouth went dry. 10 grand? That was more money than I'd ever seen in one place. How many backs would I have to break to earn $10,000? So that night, I went home with him. I had no idea that from that evening on, my entire life was about to be turned upside down. The man's name was Victor Blackwood. He was in his 40s, tall, handsome, and carried himself with an air of effortless power. I sat in his sleek Mercedes as we drove to a gated community on the North Shore, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in movies. The inside of his mansion was dripping with luxury. Every detail, from the marble floors to the art on the walls, screamed wealth. I followed Victor, my head on a swivel, feeling small and out of place. Good Lord, the biggest house back in my hometown wouldn't have fit in his garage. When we entered the living room, an elegant, poised woman was sitting on a plush white sofa. She lifted her eyes, and her gaze landed on me. In that instant, I felt like I was pinned under a spotlight. An invisible pressure settled over me, and I shifted uncomfortably on my feet. Her eyes held a kind of aristocratic coolness that made me feel utterly insignificant. She narrowed her eyes, studying me as if trying to see right through me. The intensity of her stare made the hair on my arms stand up. I didn't know what to do with my hands. Victor, sensing the tension, quickly stepped in with a smile. Eleanor, darling, this is Caleb. I met him at the club. They call him Mule. His massage technique is incredible. I thought he could help with your shoulder. Eleanor let out a soft, dismissive laugh, a hint of mockery in the curve of her lips. Then, she said something I didn't understand, her voice low and cutting. This entire house is wired, Victor. There's a difference between someone you bring home and someone I find. A flicker of embarrassment crossed Victor's face, but he recovered instantly. He just smiled. We play by the rules of the contract, right? What if you lose? She just smirked, her gaze sweeping over both of us with disdain. I stood there listening to them, completely baffled. What were they talking about? What contract? What was the difference between someone he brought home and someone she found? My mind was a mess of questions, but I knew better than to open my mouth. The air between them felt strange. They looked like a perfect couple, but there was a deep, cold rift just beneath the surface. Victor turned to me. Caleb, come with me. I'll show you to the massage room. I hurried after him, glad to escape the living room. We went upstairs to a dedicated spa room. It looked like something out of a five-star resort. Victor opened the door and gestured for me to go in and get ready. I walked inside, where everything was perfectly arranged, professional tables, oils, hot stones. I changed into a set of clean scrubs, but my heart was still pounding. A little while later, the door opened softly, and Eleanor walked in. She had changed into a silk robe and was lying face down on the massage table. I tried to steady my nerves and began preparing the oils. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Victor standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but there was a strange intensity in his eyes. Eleanor lay perfectly still, silent. I could feel a chill coming off her, a wall of pure indifference. I walked over to the table carefully. Ma'am, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'm ready to begin. She didn't answer, just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I took a deep breath, placed my hands on her shoulders, and began to work. I never could have imagined that after this night, things would spiral into a place none of US could control. Hashtag 3. As my hands worked the tight muscles in Eleanor Vance's shoulders, the room was thick with a strange, unsettling quiet. From the doorway, I could hear Victor's breathing, heavy and ragged. After a few minutes, it was Eleanor who broke the silence. What did he say your name was again? Her voice was soft and smooth, imbued with the kind of confidence that only comes with age and status. I flinched slightly, then answered nervously, "My name's Caleb, but most people call me Mule." Eleanor's brow furrowed, as if the name was a piece of grit in a pearl necklace. Mule. That's unique. How old are you? 21. She was quiet for a moment, then let out a dry, self-deprecating laugh. 21. The year I met Victor, I would have died for him. In the doorway, Victor stiffened, a sad, bitter smile touching his lips. Eleanor, her eyes still closed, spoke again, her tone flat. "Where are you from, Mule?" My hands never stopped moving. "A small town in Pennsylvania. My parents died when I was a kid. Grew up with my aunt and uncle. They sent me here to the city to get a job, and I ended up at the health club." I just told her the truth as I worked. Eleanor tilted her head slightly, her eyes now open, looking at me. There was a flicker of something in them, curiosity, maybe even appraisal. "Why Mule?" I felt my cheeks get hot and scratched the back of my neck with one hand. "The kids back home started it. Said I was built more like a mule than a boy. I cried for days when I was little. Thought there was something wrong with me." After I explained, Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned her head away. Then came a cold little laugh. Childish. Suddenly, I felt a strange curiosity about her. She had this sophisticated air, this mature, untouchable quality that I found myself drawn to. My heart started beating a little faster. A feeling I couldn't name spread through my chest. Hashtag 4. Trying to break the awkward silence, I took a risk. "Earlier, I overheard you and Mr. Blackwood. You mentioned a contract." Eleanor glanced toward the doorway where Victor stood, then let out a cold laugh. "Oh yes, we have a contract. The first one to be unfaithful loses everything. We have hundreds of millions in shared assets. To get his hands on it. Victor hasn't touched me in over a year." She paused, then added, "And I have my own people watching him. This marriage has become a game of chicken. We're just waiting to see who swerves first." At the door, Victor sighed heavily and turned, walking away. Eleanor said it all so casually, but I was frozen on the spot. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that this couple, who looked so perfect on the surface, were bound by such a brutal agreement over such an obscene amount of money. My heart hammered in my chest. Questions swirled in my mind. Eleanor must have sensed my shock. Her eyes looked hollow as she said, "You find that surprising?" I did too at first. "Huh," I stammered, "but why? You two seem so perfect together." Eleanor scoffed. "Perfect? That was 20 years ago. Now, well, you wouldn't understand." I nodded, not really understanding, but feeling a new wave of sympathy for her. She had everything anyone could want, but she didn't seem happy at all. My hands had stopped moving without me realizing it. Eleanor noticed the change. "Keep going," she said coolly. "Don't stop." We didn't speak for the rest of the session. When it was over, Eleanor rose, gave me a brief, unreadable look, and left the room. Victor came back in, his face grim. "You actually got through to her. She never talks that much to anyone." I opened my mouth, but didn't know what to say. Victor clapped a hand on my shoulder, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Get her to break our contract, kid, and I'll give you $100,000. I stared at him, then shook my head. "Sir, I may be simple, but I'm not stupid. I can't help you with that. I need the money, but I can't earn it like this." Victor's face tightened with impatience. "I'll make it $200,000. I can't wait any longer. If you don't agree, I'll report you for taking private clients. You'll be blacklisted from every spa in this city." I stood there, my mind a chaotic mess. $200,000. It was an amount I couldn't even properly imagine. But the thought of doing what he asked felt fundamentally wrong. I was just a simple kid from the country. I never wanted to be a part of something this tangled and ugly. Hashtag 5. The days passed in a haze of confusion. Then, a few days later, Eleanor contacted me herself. She called and asked me to come to her house for another massage. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach, but I couldn't refuse. I forced myself to go. When I arrived at the mansion, she was sitting on the sofa in the living room, looking as elegant and serene as ever. She saw me and nodded slightly, gesturing for me to follow her to the spa room. We walked in silence, but I was intensely aware of her presence, of that captivating aura she carried. Once in the room, I began the massage. She lay on the table, eyes closed, seemingly lost in a moment of peace. I tried to calm myself to focus only on my work, but Victor's offer echoed in my mind, making me deeply uneasy. As if reading my thoughts, Eleanor's voice, soft and lazy, broke the silence. There's a reason Victor chose you. You look so much like he did all those years ago. He thinks I have a soft spot for it. Hearing her voice like that, so close and intimate, made my heart skip a beat. It was a strange, thrilling feeling I'd never had before. Eleanor glanced back at me, a playful, knowing look in her eyes. My face flushed a deep red, and I quickly took a step back. I'm sorry. She sighed, a sound of weary resignation. Suddenly, her brow furrowed, and a low moan of pain escaped her lips. I jumped. What's wrong? Her face was pale, beaded with sweat. She spoke weakly. I'm suddenly so dizzy. I panicked. I helped her sit up, her body limp and heavy in my arms. Finally, I just scooped her up, carried her out of the mansion, and flagged down the first cab I saw, telling the driver to get to the hospital fast. After running some tests, the doctor came out. The patient suffers from vertigo. She's also been taking far too many sleeping pills. She needs to stop immediately. It's extremely dangerous. I breathed a sigh of relief. After helping a nurse get Eleanor settled in a private room, I stood by her bed. Looking at her pale face, my chest felt tight with a strange ache. She managed a weak smile. It's nothing. Look at you, making such a fuss. I clenched my fists. Why are you taking so many sleeping pills? Eleanor pursed her lips and stared out the window. They say marriage is the tomb of love, she said quietly. He didn't want to be buried, so I guess I volunteered. I just stood there completely lost. I had no idea what she meant. #6 during Eleanor's time in the hospital. Victor never showed up once. I stayed by her side the whole time. I brought her water, fed her meals, and helped her freshen up. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did my best to take care of her. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me as I bustled around the room, a complicated, unreadable expression in her eyes. A few days later, I arrived at the hospital early like usual, ready to help. I had no idea a storm was about to break over our heads. I was taking a break in the hospital waiting area when I overheard two nurses talking nearby. Did you see the story on TMZ? The CEO of Vance Holdings getting carried around by some young stud. They look pretty cozy. Cozy? She's married. The lives of the rich are just insane. A sick feeling coiled in my gut. My heart began to pound. I pulled out my phone, opened a browser, and froze. There it was. A picture of me carrying Eleanor out of her house, plastered all over the internet. The comment sections were cesspool. People were calling me a homewrecker, a gold digger. The viciousness of the words was shocking. I felt sick and wronged. I just sat there numb. But when I walked into Eleanor's room, she was unnervingly calm. She saw me and offered a faint smile. "Mule, you're here." Her voice was quiet but held a note of relief. I opened my mouth to say something, to apologize, but no words came out. Eleanor seemed to read my mind. She shook her head gently. "Don't. I already know everything." She looked at me, her gaze layered with complex emotions. Victor must have leaked the photo. He wants to crucify us both publicly. Let them say what they want. I don't care. All I know is that if it wasn't for you, I might not be here right now. Thank you, Mule. My eyes widened. Victor released a photo? How could he be so cruel? How could anyone do that to their own wife? Just for money? After a moment, Eleanor looked at me and said, "Mule, take me to my old university. I want to walk around the campus." I hesitated, then nodded. Carefully, I helped her out of the bed, and we left the hospital. We went to Northwestern University, where Eleanor had gone to college. Walking onto the campus, an air of nostalgia seemed to hang in the autumn air. Eleanor's eyes were filled with emotion as she walked slowly, as if retracing the steps of a ghost. I followed silently, not wanting to disturb her memories. Back then, Victor and I were your age, falling in love right here on this campus. Her voice was soft, laced with a gentle sorrow. I thought we'd be together until we were old and gray. I never imagined it would come to this. A profound loneliness shadowed her face, and it made my own chest ache. We ended up by a small lake on campus. Eleanor sat on a bench, staring out at the water. The sun lit up her features, but couldn't hide the deep-seated weariness in her eyes. I stood beside her, unsure of what to say. After a long time, she turned to me. "Be one." I looked at her, confused. Eleanor gave a bitter smile. "I found him in you. The man he used to be." Her gaze settled on me, and I felt a jolt of panic. What she said next made my world stop. "Don't go home tonight," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I surrendered. She took my hand, and we went back to her house. The whole way, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It felt like I was a kid again, sneaking out of the house after dark. Thrilling and terrifying. Back inside the luxurious mansion, I was hyper-aware of the security cameras mounted in every corner. It felt like Victor's eyes were on us, watching our every move. Eleanor stood in the center of the living room, a storm of emotions in her eyes. She stared at the cameras, a cold smirk playing on her lips. Then, she turned slowly to face me. My gaze was drawn to her. In that moment, she was breathtakingly beautiful, more beautiful than any woman I had ever seen. After a moment, she spoke, her voice soft. "Mule, do you like me?" The quiet question landed like a boulder in my chest. I nodded hard, my voice trembling when I finally found it. "Yes, I do." Eleanor searched my eyes, as if looking for something specific. I gathered my courage and asked, "What about you? Do you like me?" She was silent for a moment, a look of profound weariness on her face. "Does it matter?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I just stared at her, seeing the raw earnestness on my face. She seemed to reconsider. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice gentle. "Yes, you're him, back when he was young. My boy." Her voice was so tender it made my head spin. "Aren't you going to carry me upstairs?" Her words sent a rush of heat through my body. As if controlled by some other force, I stepped forward and swept her into my arms. She was soft and light, and she smelled faintly of lavender. I carried Eleanor up the grand staircase, one step at a time. When we reached her bedroom, I gently set her down on the bed. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a kind of conflicted hesitation. She kept glancing toward the door, as if still expecting Victor to walk in. I stood by the bed, frozen, unsure of what to do next. Then, Eleanor seemed to make a decision. She bit her lip, reached out, and took my hand. "Don't be scared, little boy," she whispered. Her voice was like a spell, and all my fears dissolved. That night, Victor never came home. It felt like the rest of the world had melted away, leaving just the two of us. The next morning, Eleanor woke slowly. She blinked, and for a second, a complex mix of emotions flickered across her face. Confusion, shyness, and a trace of undeniable tenderness. She looked at me, and I quickly looked down, a hot wave of awkwardness washing over me. Eleanor sighed softly but didn't say anything. The fragile peace was shattered by a loud, insistent knocking on the front door. We both jumped. Could it be Victor? But he had a key. When I opened the door, I froze. My Uncle Ray and Aunt Carol were standing on the porch, holding a casserole dish and smiling greasy smiles. "Caleb," my uncle said, his grin wide, "we heard you hit the jackpot with a rich lady. After all those years we spent raising you, don't you think it's time you paid us back?" I stared, my mind reeling. I couldn't believe they were here, saying these things. "Uncle Ray, Aunt Carol, what are you doing here?" Aunt Carol stepped forward and grabbed my hand. "Caleb, honey, we heard you were doing so well for yourself, so we came to visit. You can't forget all we did for you." I scratched my head, waving my hands dismissively. "I haven't forgotten. But how did you even find this place?" My uncle's face darkened. "We know how to use the internet, boy. Your business is all over it. We found the address easy enough. What's that look for? You're not happy to see us? We raised you, and now that you've made it, you're just going to cast us aside." "No, that's not it," I said, shaking my head. "But I'm just a massage therapist. I don't have any way to help you." Aunt Carol sneered. "A massage therapist who carries her around like a bride? Don't play dumb with us. You hit the big time and forgot where you came from. We don't need much, just enough to live comfortably. They wouldn't listen to a word I said. They started raising their voices right there on the doorstep. The commotion brought Eleanor downstairs. She took in the scene, her eyes cold with confusion and annoyance. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice like ice. My aunt and uncle immediately switched to fawning smiles. "Ms. Vance, hello. We're Caleb's aunt and uncle. We raised this boy. Now that he's doing so well, we just wanted to check in. I guess that makes you our niece-in-law now. All in the family. Eleanor's gaze dropped to the casserole dish, then back to their faces, a flicker of disgust in her eyes. "You've seen him. Now you can leave. You're not welcome here." Aunt Carol's smile vanished. "Now, hold on a minute, Ms. Vance. You can't do that. We raised him. He owes us. And a boy like him so gifted. You can't just take the milk for free." Eleanor let out a sharp, cold laugh. "Then have him repay you. It has nothing to do with me." They tried to argue more, but Eleanor was done. She turned to me. "Caleb, get them out of here." Uncle Ray's face was a thundercloud. "You'll regret this," he muttered. He and my aunt turned to leave, but Aunt Carol shot me one last, strange look I couldn't decipher. When they were gone, Eleanor turned to me, her eyes completely devoid of warmth. "Let me be clear, Caleb. You're a massage therapist. Know your place. Don't think that because of last night you get to ask for more. I can have you thrown out of here in a second." Her voice was so cold it felt like a slap. I stumbled back a few steps. I looked at her, searching for any trace of the tenderness from the night before. All I saw was a wall of ice. I didn't understand. How could she change so completely overnight? Was last night just a dream? Or had I just wanted too much? Eleanor went back into the living room, clutching her phone, her eyes glued to the screen with a desperate, anxious hope. She was waiting for Victor's call, as if a single ring from him could decide her entire fate. Watching her, a bitter mix of jealousy and anger rose in my throat. Why was she so obsessed with him? Why couldn't she just let him go and be with me, after what we'd shared? But the call never came. As the minutes stretched into hours, Eleanor's expression grew darker and darker. Her face was a mask of disappointment and despair, as if her whole world was collapsing. Suddenly, she let out a raw, agonized scream. "Victor, you wanted me out of your life, didn't you? You wanted this divorce. You won. You got what you wanted, so why won't you call me? You bastard." Her raw fury startled me. I didn't know how to comfort her. I wanted to hold her, to tell her I was there, but I was afraid she would just push me away again. All I could do was stand there, uselessly watching her unravel. Her grief turned to rage. She started throwing things, shattering expensive vases, and sweeping books off shelves. Tears streamed down her face as she cursed Victor's name. I tried to step in, to stop her, but she shoved me back with surprising strength. "Stay away from me. Who the hell are you? You don't understand anything." A full day passed. Still no word from Victor. Eleanor was a bundle of raw nerves, constantly checking her phone, her hope turning to pure rage. I tiptoed around her like a mouse, terrified of setting her off. She paced the room, muttering his name over and over. I tried to offer a word of comfort, but she shot me a look of pure venom. "Get away from me. This is all your fault. He won't call me because of you." I retreated, my chest tight with a hurt I couldn't voice. The next day, it was the same. No call. Eleanor's temper grew even more volatile. She started taking her frustration out on me, hitting and screaming. She shoved me against a wall, her words like knives. "Did you really think you could replace him? You'll never be him. Never." But then, when night fell, everything changed. She would grab my hand and pull me back to her room, clinging to me as if I were her only lifeline. Her eyes, which had been so full of hate hours before, were now filled with a desperate, passionate need that I couldn't resist. "Mule," she'd whisper, her voice soft and pleading. "Hold me. Don't leave me." Her sudden shifts left me dizzy and confused, but I couldn't deny her. We held each other in the darkness, the anger of the day forgotten, or at least postponed. In those moments, I could feel the depth of her pain and conflict. She loved Victor, but she couldn't stand his coldness. And I was her weapon of revenge, her source of comfort, her substitute. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, a new photo appeared online. It was a candid shot of Eleanor and me, clearly taken by a telephoto lens. But what was truly horrifying was the caption written by my aunt. That boy Caleb was always a handful, built different from the others, if you know what I mean. No wonder some rich lady with a wandering, I would snatch him up. The post exploded. The internet unleashed a tidal wave of filth. This guy is clearly just a boy toy sleeping his way to the top. Disgusting. And she's blind to fall for it. It's the real-life story of a gold digger. He'd sell his soul for $1. She's no better. A married woman messing around with some young punk. No shame. She must have been desperate to hook up with trash like that. Pathetic. The comments were vile, a bottomless pit of judgment and hate. I felt a surge of panic. I wasn't worried about myself, but I was terrified that my presence was destroying Eleanor's reputation. I regretted everything. I frantically called my uncle. The second he picked up, I blurted out, "Uncle Ray, you have to take that post down. I don't care about me, but you're ruining her." His voice was dripping with contempt. "Take it down? Not so easy, boy. You land in a pile of money, and suddenly you're too good for us? We worked our fingers to the bone raising you. $1 million. Otherwise, that picture stays up forever." I was furious. "You can't do this. Her money is hers. It has nothing to do with me. I'll pay you back for raising me. I swear. I'll come back home right now and take care of you for the rest of my life." He hung up on me. I immediately called my aunt. She answered with a sickeningly sweet voice. "Caleb, honey, don't be mad at your uncle. Tell you what, let's meet up and talk about this in person. Some things are better said face to face." I was confused. What is there to talk about? Just take the picture down. Her tone turned suggestive. "Oh, Caleb, you're still so young. If we talk in person, we might find a better solution. Besides, Annie has a few things to tell you. Things only you would understand." A chill went down my spine. I knew what she was implying, and it made me feel sick. I didn't go to meet her. I just paced the room, my mind racing. Through it all, Eleanor seemed completely unfazed. She read the horrible comments with a cold, detached smile. "Let them talk," she said. "It doesn't matter. Victor doesn't want me anymore anyway." I opened my mouth, wanted to scream, but I do. But what was I, really? Even I didn't know the answer to that anymore. And then, one day, the story came to an end. Victor posted a photo of a divorce certificate online. In the accompanying statement, he announced that he and Eleanor had been divorced for some time, that he was the party at fault, and that he was therefore forfeiting all marital assets. He ended by politely asking the public to leave us in peace. When Eleanor and I saw it, we both stared at the screen, unable to believe our eyes. Eleanor's hand trembled as she held her phone, scrolling back to the picture of the certificate again and again. Her eyes were wide with shock and confusion. How is this possible? This has to be fake. How could he? And he'd given up everything? What was he playing at? Just then, a man in a sharp suit arrived at the house. He was a lawyer. He held a notarized document in his hand. He approached Eleanor and presented it to her. "Ms. Vance, this is from Mr. Blackwood. It's a legal transfer. He has left his entire estate to you." Eleanor took the document, her hands shaking violently. She scanned the contents, her face growing paler with every line. "What is going on? Why would he do this?" The lawyer sighed. "Mr. Blackwood didn't want me to tell you this, but I feel you must know. He's in the ICU. He doesn't have much time left." The words hung in the air. Eleanor and I were stunned into silence. Her body swayed, and for a second, I thought she was going to collapse. "What do you mean? Why is he in the ICU?" Her voice was choked with tears. The lawyer shook his head grimly. "I don't know all the specifics. When he hired me to handle these affairs, he was already very weak. His only instruction was to give these to you and not to tell you about his condition. He didn't want you to worry. But I believe you have a right to know the truth." Tears finally broke free, streaming down Eleanor's face. She clutched the document as if it were a life raft. "I have to see him. Take me to him now." When we finally reached the hospital and stood before the doors to the ICU, Eleanor stopped dead. She stared at the closed door, her face a mask of terror. She didn't know what was waiting for her on the other side. She didn't know how she could possibly face him. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she pushed the door open. The sight inside made our hearts clench. Victor was lying in the hospital bed, a web of tubes and wires connecting him to a bank of whirring machines. His face was ashen, sunken. He looked so fragile, so helpless. Eleanor walked to his bedside and gently took his hand. Tears fell freely onto their joined hands. Victor, why? Why would you do all this? Why didn't you tell me you were sick? We promised. We promised we'd grow old together. Victor's eyes fluttered open. He looked at her, and a flicker of his old warmth returned. He managed a weak smile. Eleanor, you found out. I'm so sorry. She gripped his hand tighter, sobbing uncontrollably. He sighed, his eyes full of pain and regret. I didn't want you to be sad. Over a year ago, they found the tumor. Brain cancer. The doctors gave me a year. In that moment, my whole world fell apart. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't leave you, but I couldn't bear the thought of you watching me die. Eleanor looked like she'd been struck. Her lips trembled. You should have told me, Victor. We could have faced it together. He shook his head slowly. No, I didn't want you to see me like this. I didn't want you to waste your life worrying and grieving. I wanted you to live. So you started sleeping around? To make me leave you? Her voice was raw with anguish and anger. He looked away, ashamed. Yes, I wanted you to hate me. If you hated me, you could move on. You could start over. But you wouldn't let go. You still loved me, and it was tearing me apart. Then why the contract? She asked, her voice breaking. Victor looked back at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I had to find someone to take care of you. We never had children because of me. I knew I couldn't be with you forever. I couldn't stand the thought of you being alone after I was gone. His gaze shifted for a second, finding me in the doorway. I vetted so many people, set up so many situations, but you never took the bait. Then one day at the club, I saw Caleb. He was so much like I used to be. I could tell he was a good, decent person. I thought he could make you happy. I just wanted to build a bridge, so you wouldn't be alone. Eleanor glanced at me, then back at her husband, her expression lost. You fool, she whispered. Did you really think that would make me happy? He gently reached up and brushed a tear from her cheek. I know it was selfish, but I was out of ideas. I just don't want you to be lonely. I want you to find someone who truly loves you, who will be with you for the rest of your life. Eleanor collapsed onto his chest, her cries echoing in the sterile room. I don't want anyone else, Victor. I only want you. You can't leave me. You promised. He held her tightly, tears finally spilling down his own cheeks. I'm sorry. I can't keep that promise. But you have to live. You have to live a good life. For me. And for you. ####14. I lowered my head and let out a long, quiet breath. Then I turned and walked out of the room. This was their moment. I didn't belong here. If I stayed any longer, I would just be in the way. But as I walked down the hall, I heard Victor's weak voice call out. Caleb, I'm leaving her in your hands. You have to take care of her. Don't let anything happen to her. She's starting to fall for you. I can feel it. Promise me you'll take care of her. I broke into a run, my heart in pieces, and didn't stop. On the day of Victor's funeral, I went, but I stayed in the back, hidden in the crowd. Eleanor didn't say a single word through the entire service. She just stood there, clutching his portrait, her eyes hollow and blank, as if her soul had been scooped out. I watched her from afar, my chest aching with a helpless sympathy. I finally understood. Eleanor never loved me. I was a substitute, a ghost, a temporary comfort she reached for in her darkest hour. Now that Victor was gone, her heart had room for nothing but his memory. What was I in the face of that? In that moment, a stark clarity washed over me. I was just a simple kid from a small town. I had no fancy family, no special talents. What right did I have to dream of a life with someone like her? It was a fairy tale, and I wasn't the prince. The chasm between our worlds was too vast to cross. So, I quietly slipped out of her life and went back to the only thing I knew. I went back to the health club. I spent my days giving massages, my life falling back into a simple, busy rhythm. I learned how to deal with the world, how to stay true to myself in a city that could swallow you whole. In the 3 years that followed, I worked on thousands of people. I met all kinds. Sometimes a client would hear about my nickname, Mule, and try to hire me for a private session. I always just smiled and politely declined. In those 3 years, I often thought about Eleanor. I wondered how she was, if she had managed to climb out from under the weight of her grief. I wondered if she ever thought of me, the simple country kid who had briefly crashed in her life. But I never tried to find out. I was afraid of getting pulled back into that emotional vortex, of reopening a wound that had finally begun to scar over Then one day, 3 years later, I was working my shift like any other. Sal, my manager, came up to me. Mule, he said, got a client in room 3. She's asking for you by name. I nodded, grabbed my kit, and headed upstairs. I pushed open the door to the private room, and my heart stopped. A woman was lying on the table, her back to me. The silhouette was familiar. My hand trembled as I walked slowly toward the table. Hearing my footsteps, the woman turned over. She looked at me, and a small, sad smile touched her lips. Mule, she said, it's been a while.